something happened this week that most people brushed off as just another political clash, another round of Trump versus somebody. But the truth is, the confrontation between Donald Trump and Marjorie Taylor Greene is far bigger than a disagreement or a heated social media flare-up. When a former president publicly severs ties with one of his most loyal defenders, when he labels her a traitor, when she fires back with accusations, moral appeals, and emotional testimony, and when all of this unfolds at the exact same time, Congress forces the historic release of Epstein-related files. You're not watching a feud, you're watching a shift. Most people saw the drama, very few understood the meaning behind it. Today, I'm going to break down what changed, why it changed, and why this single moment is signaling something deeper inside the Republican Party, inside Congress, and inside Trump's own strategy. Once you see the full picture, you won't look at this week's headlines the same way again. And to understand how we got here, we have to go back to the moment everything cracked open. Picture this, you're on Air Force One. Reporters are aboard. The president is in a reflective mood, talking about his schedule, his priorities, the wins. His administration is stacking up. Then someone brings up Marjorie Taylor Greene, a congresswoman who until days ago was one of his most visible, most vocal, most unwavering allies. She campaigned for him. She defended him on every network. She spent her own money supporting his election. And Trump's answer blunt. He said she's no longer aligned with his thinking. He claimed something changed in her over the past month or two. He warned that her constituents wouldn't like it. He even hinted that people were already calling him to challenge her in a primary. That alone could have been the story, but it didn't end there. Over the next few days, Trump fired off multiple social media posts calling her every name in the book. And again, I'm not here to take sides. I'm simply laying out what's publicly available. And this part matters if you want to understand what's really going on. Washington insiders were stunned, not just by how harsh he was, but by how fast it escalated. One week she's a trusted ally, the next she's being labeled a traitor to millions of followers. So what happened? What triggered such a dramatic fallout so quickly? The answer isn't just personality clashes. It's not just ego or hurt feelings, though. Those played a part. The real answer is a choice forced on both of them by something bigger than either one. A congressional vote that was gaining momentum, a vote Trump did not want, and a vote Marjorie Taylor Greene was determined to support no matter what. That vote was about the Epstein files. If you're not glued to daily political news, let me catch you up. Over the past several months, pressure has been building from Congress and from the public to force the DOJ to release more documents related to Jeffrey Epstein. Epstein, as you know, was a wealthy financier convicted of heinous crimes involving underage girls. He died in jail under controversial circumstances. And ever since questions have been swirling, who else was involved? Who knew? Why is so much still hidden? Some lawmakers, including Marjorie Taylor Greene, believe full transparency is long overdue. They say survivors deserve answers. They say powerful people shouldn't be protected because of money or connections. And they push for a vote to force the DOJ to release more records. Trump, meanwhile, saw it differently. He argued publicly and privately that the whole thing was a distraction. He said Republicans should be focusing on issues that matter to everyday Americans: inflation, immigration, affordability, the economy. He claimed Democrats were using the Epstein story as a political weapon, a way to muddy the waters and draw attention away from what he sees as his administration's successes. He even called the effort a hoax, not denying Epstein's crimes, but insisting the Democrats' framing was designed to trap him and his party. And here's where it gets tricky. Trump's name does appear in some of the released documents, not because he's accused of wrongdoing. Officials and reporters have made that clear, but because he moved in the same social and business circles where Epstein operated. Trump says he cut ties with Epstein years ago, and there's evidence of that. But the fact that his name keeps resurfacing makes the topic uncomfortable. It drags attention back to a part of his past. Do you prefer to leave behind? Marjorie Taylor Greene saw something else entirely. She didn't see a distraction. She saw an obligation. She met survivors. She heard their stories. She learned how long they've waited for real answers. And she made her choice. She was going to support the vote. She wasn't backing down for anyone. So now you had two figures deeply tied to the MAGA movement, both committed to conservative principles, suddenly pulling in opposite directions. Trump wanted the movement focused on his broader agenda. Greene wanted to leverage her platform for transparency and accountability, even if it meant going against the president. And when those motivations collided, things got personal fast. One of the things that seemed to bother Trump the most wasn't simply that she disagreed with him. It was the way she took that disagreement public during a major network interview. Greene explained how she had reached out privately, how she tried to lay out her reasoning, how she felt the survivors deserved to be heard. And then came the moment that reportedly pushed Trump over the edge. She released screenshots of private text messages between them. In Trump's world, loyalty is the highest currency, and in his view, loyalty includes keeping private conversations behind closed doors. So when Greene made those messages public, he saw it as a breach of trust, almost like she was turning their relationship into leverage or using it to boost her own visibility. For him, that crossed the line. Greene, on the other hand, said she posted the messages to show she had attempted to handle things respectfully, that she wasn't acting recklessly or trying to blindside him, but she also said something else that heightened the tension. According to her, after Trump began criticizing her publicly, she started receiving an influx of threats, the kind she considered serious. She believed Trump's wording, especially calling her a traitor, intensified that hostility for her. This wasn't only a political fight anymore. It had become a matter of personal safety. So suddenly you had two people who both felt wronged. Trump felt betrayed by someone he had elevated and defended. Greene felt abandoned, even endangered by someone she had supported for years. And both of them were responding emotionally, publicly, and with no real interest in backing down. But here's the key point. If this were just two strong personalities clashing, it wouldn't matter much. What makes this moment significant is what it reveals about the broader landscape. Behind the personal conflict, something deeper was shifting, something political, something structural. For nearly a decade, Trump has been the dominant force in the Republican Party. His endorsement shaped primaries. His approval, his base didn't just support him, they followed his lead. If you were aligned with Trump, you were safe. Cross him and you were done. But this time, when Trump made it clear he didn't want the Epstein files vote to move forward, something unexpected happened. The vote happened anyway, and it wasn't even close. The House passed it with overwhelming Republican support. Only one Republican voted no. That means dozens of lawmakers, many who owe their careers to Trump, openly voted against his wishes. Some analysts say this was a one-off situation, a uniquely sensitive issue Trump couldn't control, but others see the beginning of something much larger. They're calling it the early stages of a lame duck phase, the moment when a president's influence begins to weaken because he's in his second term, because he won't appear on another ballot, and because lawmakers are looking toward their own futures rather than his. Marjorie Taylor Greene's shift fits into that pattern, whether she's positioning herself for a future presidential bid following moral conviction or a mix of both. The reality is simple. She's now openly challenging Trump in a way that would have been unthinkable just a year or two ago. And her tone has changed too. In interviews recently, Greene did something surprising. She apologized not for backing the Epstein files release She's firm on that instead. She apologized for her past style of politics. She said she wanted to move away from toxic language, that she regretted some of the harsh rhetoric she'd used, and that she hoped people could treat each other better and find a new direction for someone whose entire political identity was built on confrontation. This is a dramatic shift. So why now some people believe her meetings with Epstein survivors changed her perspective, that hearing their stories made her rethink her approach. Others believe it's strategic, an attempt to broaden her appeal and reboot her public image if she plans to run for higher office. If she wants to be taken seriously on a national stage, she'll need a tone that reaches beyond the hardcore base. Whatever the reason, it adds another layer of complexity, because suddenly this isn't Trump versus the old Greene. This is Trump versus a new version of Greene. Appears to be evolving into someone he didn't expect and can't easily control. Then came the most controversial moment of all. In one interview, Greene was asked why Trump was pushing so hard to block the file's release instead of deflecting. She raised a question on camera, wondering whether outside pressure, possibly from a foreign government, could be involved. She even posted an image referencing donations from a pro-Israel lobbying group. She later clarified she wasn't accusing anyone of anything, only asking questions. She said she had no evidence, just trying to reflect the confusion many people were expressing, but the damage was already done. In today's media landscape, once you introduce the idea of foreign influence or hidden pressure, it spreads fast. Trump's team pushed back hard, calling it baseless and irresponsible. Some commentators accused Greene of stepping into conspiracy territory. Others defended her as simply asking uncomfortable but necessary questions about power. But what's undeniable is this: that moment solidified the break. This wasn't just a policy disagreement anymore. It wasn't even a messaging dispute. It was about trust. And once trust cracks in politics, especially in public, it almost never fully repairs. Now, zooming out, you start to see the real story. And let's begin with Trump's perspective, because understanding his mindset explains why everything escalated so quickly. Donald Trump isn't a traditional politician. He sees the world as a businessman, someone who's spent decades shaping brands, controlling narratives, and weathering crises. And heading into the latter half of his second term, he's laser focused on one goal: shifting his administration's message toward the issues that move voters, not the issues that generate noise. Affordability is at the top of that list. Groceries, gas, housing can stretch their paychecks. Whether seniors can retire with confidence. Every poll, every focus group shows this is what matters most to Americans. Trump knows this, his team knows this, and they've been working to make sure every speech, every interview, every announcement reinforces one message: we are lowering costs. We are putting Americans first. But when the entire news cycle is swallowed up by Epstein, old documents, old photos, old social circles, that message gets drowned out. Instead of talking about inflation or immigration or jobs, Trump is forced to answer questions about the past. From his perspective, it's a trap, a distraction designed to pull him into defensive territory. And when members of his own party help push that distraction, it feels like betrayal, whether they intend it or not. And this feud was never just about Greene. It was about a growing frustration inside Trump's circle that, and some of his allies are no longer aligned with the mission as tightly as they once were. And one more thing matters. Trump knows he can't run for a third term. He understands what that means. His power now depends on how strongly he can shape the movement and the future leaders who come after him. But if loyalty starts to crack, if lawmakers begin prioritizing their own futures over his agenda, his influence weakens fast. Some of his advisors have reportedly been watching for exactly this, and the Epstein vote was a red flag because even with Trump's personal lobbying, even with his public opposition, even with his attacks, the vote still passed overwhelmingly. That wasn't supposed to happen, not in the era of Trump-dominated GOP politics, but it did. And that's why this feud matters. It's not just about Trump or Greene. It's about what her defiance represents. A party beginning to imagine life after Trump, even while he's still in office. Now let's flip the coin and look at the other side, because Marjorie Taylor Greene's stance reveals something just as important about where the Republican base is right now. Greene didn't just wake up one day and decide to go after Donald Trump. By all accounts, this was a deeply personal choice, one shaped by conversations she had with survivors of Jeffrey Epstein's abuse. These were women who were teenagers when they were victimized, women who spent decades begging someone in power to take their experiences seriously, women who watched Epstein get a sweetheart deal while powerful men seemed to walk away untouched, and documents that could expose the full story stayed sealed. And when Greene met those survivors, when she listened to them, something shifted. She later said she couldn't, in good conscience, turn her back on them. She couldn't choose political strategy over their pain, or let those files stay hidden simply because it was inconvenient or distracting. Now, you might be skeptical. Maybe you're thinking, come on, this is politics. Everyone has an angle, and maybe you're right. Maybe Greene saw a chance to cast herself as a champion of transparency, to boost her national profile, to set up a future run for higher office. Maybe the timing was just too convenient. But here's what matters. Even if all that is true, it doesn't change the fact that she tapped into something real, because when reporters went into her Georgia district and asked voters what they thought, the answers were striking. People said they wanted the truth. They questioned why everything was so secretive. They said that if powerful people did wrong, that wrongdoing should come to light no matter who it embarrassed. One voter put it simply, release them and be done with it, because this is going to be a fight to the end. Another said, I don't know who they're trying to protect. That's all I want to know. And again, I'm just the messenger, but this matters because it exposes a tension at the center of the Republican coalition. Right now, on one side, you have Trump and his team pushing a disciplined, strategic message. Stay focused on the economy. Don't get distracted. Don't hand the other side ammunition. On the other side, you have a grassroots base that's deeply skeptical of institutions, deeply hungry for accountability, and deeply convinced that elites have been getting away with things for far too long. Those instincts don't always align. Sometimes pushing for transparency creates distractions. Sometimes staying on message feels like a cover-up. And when these tensions surface, they pull the party in opposite directions. Whether she meant to or not, Marjorie Taylor Greene ended up representing that second impulse. And the fact that so many voters in her district, solid red, pro-Trump Republican voters, backed her on this, tells you the demand for transparency is not fringe, it's real. It cuts across traditional political lines. And that's why this feud matters, because it's not just Trump versus Greene. It's two competing visions of what the Republican Party should prioritize moving forward. So let's pull it all together and look at what this moment means, not just for these two individuals, but for the broader political landscape. First, it signals that Trump's influence, while still enormous, is no longer absolute. For years, the assumption in Washington was simple. If Trump wanted something, Republicans would fall in line. That assumption doesn't hold the same weight anymore. Lawmakers are beginning to make independent calculations about their own futures, their own constituencies, their own legacies. That doesn't mean Trump is powerless, not at all, but it does mean the dynamic is shifting. Second, it exposes a deeper fault line within the MAGA movement itself. Is MAGA fundamentally loyalty to Trump, or is it a set of principles that can exist with or without him? Is it about winning elections by focusing on popular issues? Or is it about demanding accountability and transparency, even when it's politically risky? These are hard questions, and people inside the movement don't all agree on the answers. Third, it shows how fast political relationships can fracture. Just weeks ago, Trump and Greene were appearing at rallies together, boosting each other's messages. Now they're attacking each other online, calling each other traitors and lunatics. That kind of whiplash is jarring, but revealing. It shows how thin political loyalty can be when it's tested by real disagreement. And fourth, it highlights something often forgotten in the noise: the voices of people who've been harmed. The survivors of Epstein's abuse didn't create this fight. They didn't ask to be used as political leverage, but their pain, their demand for justice is what set all of this in motion. And in the end, that might be the part that matters most. There's one more angle worth considering, and it's about the future. While Trump and Greene are locked in their conflict, the rest of the political world is watching closely. Democrats are studying the cracks. Republican challengers are calculating how to use them. Voters are forming new opinions about who they trust and who they don't. And all of this is happening at a time when the stakes couldn't be higher. We're talking about fundamental questions of justice, accountability, and power. We're talking about whether institutions can be trusted, whether transparency is worth the cost, whether loyalty means standing up for what you believe is right. If you've followed politics for a long time, you know, moments like this don't come often. Most political fights are shallow, predictable, forgettable, but every once in a while, something happens that feels different, something that reveals what's really happening beneath the surface. This is one of those moments. So where does it go from here? Honestly, no one knows. Trump and Greene could reconcile. Stranger things have happened. She could apologize, he could accept, and they could move forward as allies again. Or the rift could deepen. She might become a vocal critic, maybe even a challenger, or like many political relationships, they might just drift apart. What seems clear is this: something fundamental has shifted. The old rules, the idea that total loyalty to Trump was the only thing that mattered, that the MAGA movement spoke with one voice, that internal disagreement stayed behind closed doors. Those rules don't apply the same way anymore. But here's the bigger point. Most people watching this unfold only saw a personal feud, a social media argument, a bit of political drama. Very few understood the deeper currents underneath until now.